Topic for this prompt, I did numerical reasoning in the third grade EIP class setting. My standards and content, this aligns with Georgia Standards and the Georgia Curriculum Guide. Unit 1, Building a Strong Foundation. 3, NR1, Use place value understanding to represent, read, write, and compare numerical values up to 10,000 and round whole numbers to 1,000. The standard I'm going to be focusing on, the substandard, is going to be to read and write multi-digit numbers, whole numbers up to 10,000 to the thousands using the base 10 numerals in expanded form. I'm also going to incorporate standard 2 is going to be ELA, SGE 3, RI 7. Use information from illustration, so maps, charts, graphs to understand text. And as I stated in my introduction, this is an EIP classroom, so I'm going to be focusing on reviewing the skills that they were taught in second grade, which is to represent, read, write, and compare numerical values up to the thousands. And I'm going to use that to assess their skill set and their skill level and see where they're at. And then I will build on that throughout the unit. But this is just the beginning of the unit, so that is why I'm just going to start with hundreds, tens, and ones. So the learning goals, which I would read in the beginning of my lesson and also at the end of my lesson and have the students repeat, is I can read, write, and represent numbers in base 10 and expanded form. I can use information from illustrations to understand text. Lesson vocabulary would be place value, base 10, expanded form, standard form, and equation. And then teacher background knowledge. Teachers should be able to have an understanding of place value and number sense. They should have strategies for scaffolding large number concepts, and then the ability to model using manipulatives and visuals. By the end of this unit, students should be able to accurately read and write multi-digit whole numbers up to 10,000 in both base 10 numerals and expanded form. Students should be able to understand that the position of a digit determines its value of a number, so place value reasoning, and then read the graph and identifying the number for each class. Then read each number in expanded form. For example, 3,452 is 3,000 plus 400 plus 50 plus 2. And then they should also be able to compare the two class totals using greater than, less than, or equal to. So differentiation is intentional modification of content, process, product, and learning environment to address students' varying readiness levels, interests, and learning profiles. Differentiation means changing instruction to meet the needs of each individual child in your classroom. Why is it important? It ensures equitable access to grade level content. It supports your struggling learners while challenging advanced learners and promotes engagement and confidence for all of the students. So some differentiation that I use in my classroom is I use flexible small groups based on formative data from the lessons. I try to do tiered math task. So I'll do like basic comparison for emerging learners, multi-step problems for some advanced learners. I try to provide scaffolding sentence frames, sentence starters for some of my lower writers. For example, the number is blank, and I expanded it into blank. And then I also use the use of technology, progress learning. They can get on my study plan, and it's individualized to each student's needs. The PCK is integration of subject matter expertise with effective instructional strategies to make content understandable for learners. It connects to differentiation because it allows me to design varied entry points into complex math concepts. So I can anticipate misconceptions. So, for example, misunderstanding the value of 0 in expanded form, and provide targeted scaffolds. Some PCK examples in my classroom is using base 10 blocks to represent numbers physically before introducing abstract comparison symbols, so that the students are able to get tangible items in their hands before they are using these greater than, less than, equal than symbols at the end of the unit. Teacher created resources to practice base 10 math problems. So the first approach that I use, and I always do in my classroom, especially teaching third grade EIP, is modeling. Model. That is carved in my brain from teaching kindergarten and first grade for 8 years. Modeling is the process in which a teacher demonstrates a skill, a strategy, or a concept step by step while making the thinking visible to the students. So step by step thinking outside. So you're thinking in your brain, but it's coming out of your mouth. You're showing and you're modeling for your students your thought process, how to do it, what you're thinking, why you're thinking, and it just kind of gives them an example, especially for the visual learners. So the rationals, it provides a clear example of what success looks like before students attempt the task independently. I'm the type of person where I want to know exactly what you're looking for when given a job. So I want to see an example. I want to see exactly what I'm supposed to be doing and what you're expecting me to do. So I try to do that also for my students. Especially with my EIP students, they visualize all these mathematical thinking and problem solving steps. This type of approach really, really supports my EIP students. I've seen so much growth in them from the beginning to the end of the year. So in my classroom, on chart paper, the teacher is going to model writing the number 235 in expanded form. Now, I'm going to start with a lower number first with hundreds, tens, and ones, just because I am teaching an EIP classroom. So I want to, like I said, review that skill that they learned about in second grade, and then we will build on that based on the mastery of the skill, the second grade skill. So I'm just going to start off with doing 235. I'm going to break that down on anchor chart paper. I'm going to model how I broke that down. I have 200, I have plus 30, plus 5. And then also, I'm going to take my manipulatives and show my students the 200 base 10 model, or the base 10 blocks, the 30, and then the 5. So, and then in whole group, teachers and students will practice decomposing those together. I will call up students and they will practice on my smartboard and my camera, building the number, writing it into expanded form, telling me how many tens, telling me how many ones, telling me how many hundreds. And then the teacher will model, I will model putting the number in expanded form, visual models identifying how many thousands, hundreds, tens, and ones. So I will just kind of, you'll see on some of my artifacts that I did the hundreds first, and then based on my students' skill set, we will go from thousands, or I will reteach and revisit that again. So after modeling a few examples, students are going to try a few problems on the board, so I can just kind of get a little quick check to see where they're at. So here's what I was talking about, the evidence of approach 1. I did this whole group while my students were sitting on the carpet. I had the manipulatives and they took some turns and they came up, and then after I got done modeling it, I gave them their manipulatives. We built some numbers together, and then I had them come up on the board and build, a number for the class, and just kind of interactive. But some of the students were, or all the students had tangible items in their hands so that they were building instead of just sitting there bored watching. So then the second approach is hands-on learning. Hands-on learning is an educational strategy that directly involves learners by encouraging them to do something in order to learn about it. It is learning by doing. While some subjects like music or art are just hands-on, even abstract subjects like mathematics can benefit from activities that engage different regions of the brain. So for younger learners, ELL learners, or even students with learning disabilities or that a little bit behind their peers, hands-on teaching strategies are often the key to learning. So this engages multiple senses, it increases retention, and it increases understanding, provides concrete experience that supports the learning in math. Some examples in my classroom is students using the base 10 blocks. I have place value charts for students to use. I have hundreds tables for students to use, number cards for physically building the numbers, decomposing them into expanded form, comparing values, and then having the students rotate through math stations that are requiring manipulatives of materials such as sorting the numbers into greater than, less than, just some examples throughout the unit. So let's see. prepare the learning opportunities. So my above level learners, I would enrich them with larger numbers, move them on to thousands numbers, place value, multi-step comparisons, or then start integrating some real world data. So my struggling learners, make sure that they have access to manipulatives. I could provide them with support, number line, guided examples, teacher support, pulling them back in small groups. Behavior management, just making sure that, my classroom instructions, my expectations are clear. The structured rotation, students are not just running all over the place. They have signals when they're supposed to be transitioning. They're cleaning up. Everybody has roles. Active engagement to minimize off-task behavior. Having students repeat back to me what they're supposed to be doing, step 1, step 2, step 3. Showing me, they're moving from group A to group B when I ring my bell. Modeling that also, and making sure that they're able to repeat the directions back to me. Then technology integration. We could do some self-checking, digital quizzes. For example, boom cards. I really like using boom cards in my classroom because the students think that they're just playing games, but I'm able to see what they are doing on there. Same as Kahoot. I can assign little checks and they get so excited because they think that they're playing a little Kahoot game. And then my county that I work in, we utilize progress learning. Students get on My Study Plan and they're able to, My Study Plan is differentiated and it meets the students where they are. Students are also able to go on My Study Plan and select the standard that we are working on, and it gives them lesson videos, and it also gives them support. And then once they master that, they get 3 stars, and they call them like galaxy stars, and students love to get their little galaxy stars. Here's some evidence of my approach number 2. So as you can see right here, I was working one-on-one with this student, and she was building for me 531. She put it into expanded form. Then she was telling me how many hundreds, how many tens, how many ones. And I did notice as she was doing this, so as you can see right down here, she wrote 300 hundreds, 30 tens, and then 1 ones. And this is a really big thing that I'm seeing with my students is they are struggling to understand that 300 is the same as 300. She wrote 500 hundreds. So getting them to understand that when they are putting, 30 tens, that is actually 300. So they should be writing 3 tens and 500s instead of 500 hundreds. So that's definitely a struggle that I've noticed with a lot of my EIP students, that they're having a hard time with that. So the hands-on approach, as my students were working on their big ideas, which is the resource that my county uses for math, they had manipulatives to also solve this. So right here you can see that they're circling the value of the underlying digit. Right here, there is the same. Now for 1, 2, and 3, I did this with them. 4 through 7, that's why she's got it marked off right here, because I told them to try 4 through 7 independently, and then with some guided practice, they would do it independently, and then we would check it whole group. And then down here, 8, 9, and 10, they were writing the value of the digit that was underlined, and then expanding it into expanded form. And then down here, it's just kind of a little more in-depth thinking. Students were using these number cards, 5, 8, and 2, and they were having to put them in the greatest number and then put them in the least number. And so when I do these Big Ideas math pages, I always like to, this top right here is where I model it, and they're doing it with me and copying it. And then right here, we're doing this together. I let them branch off and do it independently right here, and then we come back and check it. And then there is a practice page that they can do for just like a little informal assessment. So reflections. Some of the strengths, the approaches fostered engagement and conceptual understanding, as well as clear scaffolding for my EIP students. Using the modeling and hands-on learning, it made the concept more concrete for my 3rd graders, or incorporating the base 10 blocks, the number cards, and the place value charts. Helped with my EIP students, pairing the place value with the reading informational, so using graphs and charts reflects the authentic real-world application. And they can also see why numbers matter beyond math. And I'll show you the graph in just a second. So reflections for improvement. So the current checks for understanding are strong, but they could expand to include a little bit more student explanations. So, for example, asking how do you know that this number is larger, push them for the reasoning. How do you know that it's 400s instead of 400 hundreds? This lesson currently emphasizes a teacher provided graph, so maybe I could add some opportunities for students to collect the class data and build their own graphs in the future. So commitment moving forward, continue redefining the differentiated task, explore some more online resources. And also another thing that I did not put on here that I definitely think the improvement is focusing a little bit more on the 500s instead of 500 hundreds. Like I was saying, the 310s instead of 3010s. That concept is just mind-blowing for them. Some of the materials needed, so chart paper for the teacher modeling. I have a document camera, vocabulary cards that we go over at the beginning of the lesson, learning targets that the students can easily view, base 10 blocks for those tangible items that they can have in their hand, place value charts for my struggling students, number cards for expanded form practice. Also, those number cards would also, I think, help in the sense when they were writing the hundreds, tens, and ones. Being able to place those number cards instead of having to write the number and think of it themselves. It might help with more practice in order for them to build on doing that independently. So some 100 charts for my lower learners. We had our big ideas, student workbooks, and then a teacher-created bar graph. So this is the assessment assignment that I'm going to use at the end. So it integrates the graphs and also expanded form. So this assessment, it looks like this. We have how many books did Miss Collins' class read, how many books did Miss Drake's class, how many books did Miss Boone's class, and then as you can see over here, they are going to read the graph and they are going to tell how many books each class read. They're going to write it into expanded form, and they're also going to tell me who read the most and then use some compare and contrast symbols. And that is a skill that we've been working on. They've been working on since kindergarten. So I just kind of want to do a little pre-assessment before we move on to the next lesson in this unit. Like I said, this was just introducing these standards, and this is the very first lesson in this unit. So, alrighty, well, thank you. I hope that this was informative and you enjoyed. Thanks.